The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with voices from a dozen different species. Jake Morrison stood at the speaking platform, his weathered face showing the strain of trying to convince beings who had never known real war. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a stark contrast to the flowing robes and crystalline armor worn by the alien representatives around him. "The Devourers are coming," Jake said, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "Our deep space scouts have detected movement in the void sector. Something ancient is waking up, and when it reaches our galaxy, none of us will survive." The Zelanti representative, a tall insect-like creature named Zektar, clicked his sharp mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. His green carapace gleamed under the chamber's artificial suns as he rose from his seat. "Ambassador Morrison, your species has been in space for less than 200 years, Zektar said, his voice carrying the tone adults use with stubborn children. "We have kept records for over 50,000 years. These devourers you speak of are nothing but old stories told by dead civilizations." Captain Lisa Carter stepped forward from behind Jake. She commanded one of Earth's patrol ships, though the aliens considered human vessels to be primitive toys compared to their own sleek warships. Her black hair was pulled back in a military knot, and her brown eyes held the hard look of someone who had seen too much violence. "Our scanning equipment has found energy patterns that match the ancient warnings," Lisa said. "The same warnings we discovered carved into the ruins on 17 different dead worlds. Each civilization that left those messages spoke of the same threat." The Vorthak delegation began making the harmonic vibrations that served as their laughter. Fleet Admiral Morvex, their military leader, stood to his full height of 9 feet. His blue-gray skin was marked with the ritual scars that showed his high rank, and his forearms moved in gestures of dismissal. "Perhaps the humans should worry about their own small conflicts instead of chasing shadows," Morvex rumbled, his voice deep enough to rattle the chamber's walls. "Your weapons are crude. Your ship's barely able to cross between star systems without breaking down. What could you possibly know about threats we have never seen?" Dr. Alex Turner, Earth's expert on alien ruins, activated a holographic display above the platform. The image showed stone carvings covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when looked at directly. His gray beard trembled as he spoke, aged beyond his years by the knowledge he carried. "These markings appear on dead worlds across 3 different spiral arms of our galaxy," Alex explained. "Each civilization that carved them tried to warn those who came after. They all speak of entities that eat not just planets or stars, but the very fabric of space and time itself." The council chamber erupted in multiple conversations as representatives discussed the human claims in their native languages. The hegemony delegates, tall pale beings with enlarged heads, communicated through rapid flashes of colored light across their smooth skin. The Kathrani, small furry creatures known for their trading skills, chittered among themselves in high-pitched voices. Counselor Yixara, the Zelanti leader, raised one of her 4 arms for silence. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as she fixed her gaze on the human delegation. "Even if we accepted your interpretation of these ancient carvings," she said, "what would you have us do? Our combined fleets represent the most advanced military force in galactic history. Our technology has kept peace for over 1,000 years." Jake felt the familiar frustration that came with trying to explain danger to people who had never faced it. Earth's history was filled with war, struggle, and the constant threat of extinction. Humanity had learned to prepare for the worst because the worst usually happened. But these aliens had known only peace and prosperity for so long they had forgotten that the universe was fundamentally hostile to life. "You have kept peace because nothing has challenged you," Jake replied. "Your technology is indeed impressive, but it was designed for exploration, trade, and maintaining order among civilized species. What happens when you face something that doesn't follow the rules of civilized warfare?" The debate continued for hours, with each species presenting their own reasons why the human warnings should be ignored. The Zelanti spoke of their vast databases that contained no mention of these supposed devourers. The Vorthak detailed their military might and how no force in the galaxy could stand against their fleets. The hegemony presented mathematical models showing the impossibility of life forms existing in the empty space between galaxies. As the session drew to a close, Jake watched the alien representatives file out of the chamber. They spoke among themselves about trade agreements, territorial disputes, and scientific exchanges. None seemed concerned that 3 outer rim colonies had stopped responding to communication attempts in the past month. None appeared worried that deep space monitoring stations were detecting impossible energy readings from the galactic edge. Later, aboard the human transport ship USS Nevada, Jake met with his team in the cramped briefing room. The ship was typical of human engineering, built for function rather than beauty. Its thick armor plating and redundant systems made it look clumsy next to the elegant vessels used by other species. But it could survive impacts that would tear apart an alien cruiser. "They won't listen," Lisa said, reviewing the day's proceedings on her portable computer. "Even when we showed them the sensor data from the outer rim monitoring stations, they found excuses to dismiss it." Alex spread star charts across the metal table, marking the locations where dead civilizations had left their warnings. Red dots showed where colonies had recently gone silent, forming a pattern that pointed toward the galaxy's inhabited core. "The timeline is accelerating," he said, tracing the progression with his finger. "Whatever destroyed those ancient civilizations is moving faster than before. At the current rate, it will reach the major populated systems within 6 months." Jake stared out the ship's small viewport at the distant stars. Somewhere in that darkness, something that had destroyed entire civilizations was stirring. The other species might have superior technology and thousands of years more experience in space, but they had grown soft in their dominance. They had forgotten the simple truth that humanity had never been allowed to forget. Sometimes the monsters hiding in the dark were real. "Send a coded message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them to move forward with the Phoenix project. If the Galactic Council won't act on our warnings, we'll have to face this threat ourselves." The message would take 3 days to reach Earth through the quantum communication network. By then, Jake hoped, the military planners back home would understand what he already knew. The galaxy was about to face something that would test whether civilization could survive contact with true alien horror. And when that test came, humanity would need to be ready to fight for everyone, whether they wanted that protection or not. 3 weeks after the council meeting, the first attack came without any warning at all. The wealthy Kethrani trade world of New Valoria, home to 40 million people, simply stopped talking to the rest of the galaxy. When other worlds tried to contact them, they found nothing but silence where a busy planet had been sending messages just hours before. Commander Ryan Pierce was the captain of the human patrol ship USS Dakota when the emergency call came through. His vessel was one of the older human designs, built thick and heavy with enough armor to stop a meteor and weapons that could crack a small moon in half. The aliens thought human ships were ugly and outdated, but Ryan knew they could take damage that would destroy the prettier vessels other species preferred. "Set course for New Valoria," Ryan ordered from his captain's chair. "Maximum speed." The Dakota jumped through space using human-built engines that were loud, rough, and completely reliable. While alien ships glided through space like graceful dancers, human vessels moved like sledgehammers, breaking through problems instead of going around them. When they arrived at the coordinates where New Valoria should have been, Lieutenant Kate Sullivan looked up from her science station with confusion written across her face. She had been monitoring space around alien worlds for 5 years, but she had never seen readings like these. "Sir, this is impossible," Kate said, her voice tight with worry. "The sensors show a planet-sized gravity field, but there's nothing here. It's like something ate the entire world and left only empty space behind." Ryan studied the readings on his command screen. The Dakota's sensors were simple compared to alien technology, but they were designed to work in the worst conditions imaginable. Human paranoia had led to scanning systems that could detect threats other species never thought to look for. "Any survivors?" Ryan asked. "No, sir. But there's something else." Kate's hands trembled as she worked her controls. "I'm detecting traces of dark matter arranged in geometric patterns. The same patterns Dr. Turner showed us from those ancient warnings." Before Ryan could respond, the space around them began to change. The viewport started to darken as something huge moved just beyond what their eyes could see. Every light on the ship flickered, and for a moment that felt like hours. Every human aboard felt a terror so deep it seemed to come from their very bones. "Emergency jump preparations," Ryan ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Get us out of here right now." The Dakota's jump engines fired just as tentacles of living darkness reached toward them. These were not tentacles made of any matter that existed in normal space, but appendages that seemed to be made of the absence of reality itself. The ship escaped, but not before its computers recorded something that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the universe. Back on Earth, Admiral Helen Foster reviewed the Dakota's sensor data in the war room, deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The facility had been built to survive nuclear war, then expanded and hardened further as humanity learned that the universe contained threats, far worse than anything they could do to themselves. The energy patterns matched Turner's predictions. Exactly, reported Colonel Danny Brooks, who ran intelligence for the defense fleet. Whatever destroyed New Valoria isn't using normal weapons. It's breaking down matter at the level of atoms and smaller particles. Helen studied the holographic display that showed the affected areas of space. Red zones marked where worlds had vanished, creating a growing sphere of nothingness that was moving steadily toward the galaxy's populated center. The other species were finally starting to pay attention, but their responses were chaotic and poorly organized. "What's the status of the Phoenix project?" Helen asked. "The USS Defiance is almost complete," Danny replied. "Dr. Elizabeth Warren's team has successfully installed the new weapon systems, but we haven't had time to test everything properly." The Phoenix project was humanity's answer to threats they couldn't yet imagine. While other species built ships for specific jobs like exploration, trade, or scientific research, humans had designed the Defiance for one single purpose: destroying things that shouldn't exist. The ship used every lesson humanity had learned from its violent history. Its hull was made from materials that bent space and time around them, making it nearly impossible for enemies to target accurately. Its weapons were designed to function even if the normal laws of physics stopped working. Most importantly, it would be crewed by humans, a species that had never met a problem they couldn't solve by fighting harder and meaner than anything else. "How long until we can launch?" Helen asked. 2 weeks, Admiral. But there are concerns about the crew." Danny hesitated before continuing. "Speak freely, Colonel." "Ma'am, the psychological tests are troubling. Captain Nathan Clark and his team scored extremely high for aggression and creative problem-solving under pressure, but their mental stability ratings are barely acceptable. These are the kind of people who volunteer for missions they don't expect to survive." Helen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Perfect. That's exactly what this mission is." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was finally admitting they had a real crisis. Emergency meetings ran day and night as species after species reported lost colonies and sensor readings that made no sense. The Zelanti had lost 3 worlds in 2 days. The Vorthak had lost 2 of their military outposts. Panic was beginning to spread among civilizations that had known only peace and prosperity for thousands of years. Admiral Morvek stood before a war council that included military leaders from every major species. His blue-gray skin had taken on a darker shade, a sign of extreme stress among his people. "Our fleets are useless," he announced bluntly. "Every ship that gets within 10 light minutes of these entities reports the same thing. Half the crew goes insane, and the other half claims that space itself is screaming." Fleet Commander Velthos of the Hegemony activated a holographic display showing their latest attack patterns. "We tried coordinated strikes with 50 of our best warships. The enemy didn't even seem to notice. Our weapons passed right through them like they weren't really there." Counselor Yixara clicked her mandibles in frustration. "What do the humans say? They were the ones who warned us this would happen." "Ambassador Morrison has been remarkably quiet," Morvex replied. "His government hasn't responded to our requests for assistance. Some reports suggest they're building something in secret, but our intelligence networks can't penetrate their security." What the alien leaders didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this kind of war since the first warnings from the ancient ruins. While other species had spent centuries perfecting peace, humans had spent the same time learning how to fight enemies that didn't follow any rules. Dr. Turner, now serving as an advisor to multiple alien governments, tried to explain what the ancient texts had really meant. He stood before a gathering of the galaxy's greatest minds, but his message was one they didn't want to hear. The civilizations that faced the Devourers before had one thing in common, he said. They all tried to fight using conventional warfare first. Ships, weapons, tactics designed for conflicts between rational enemies. Every single one of them failed. Then how did any civilization survive? Asked Chief Scientist Caravan of the Hegemony. Turner's expression was grim. The ones that survived stopped trying to be civilized. They built weapons that violated the fundamental laws of physics, They recruited soldiers who were psychologically damaged enough to use those weapons. They became monsters to fight monsters. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The peaceful galaxy they had all worked to build and maintain was about to end. In its place would come something darker, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. But in the depths of space where New Valoria had once been, the darkness was spreading. And somewhere in that darkness, things that had destroyed entire galaxies before were waking up, hungry for the consciousness and order that made civilization possible. The emergency war meeting of the Galactic Council turned into chaos within the first 10 minutes. Admiral Morvex slammed his massive fist down on the crystal table so hard that cracks spread across its surface like spider webs. His forearms gestured wildly as he shouted at the assembled representatives. 18 worlds lost in 2 weeks, he roared, his voice making the chamber's walls vibrate. Where are your battle plans? Where are your strategies? All I hear are excuses and empty promises. The alien leaders had no good answers to give him. For thousands of years, their conflicts had been solved through talking, economic pressure, or small fights with clear rules that everyone followed. Nothing in their long history had prepared them for an enemy that simply erased entire star systems from existence, without warning or negotiation. Counselor Yixara tried to restore order to the meeting. Our combined fleets represent the most powerful military force in galactic history. Surely if we coordinate our attacks properly— Coordinate attacks against what? Interrupted Prime Navigator Velthos of the Hegemony. Our ships get close to these things and half the crew loses their minds. The other half reports that space itself is making sounds like screaming. Ambassador Jake Morrison had been missing from these emergency sessions, but now he walked into the chamber with Captain Lisa Carter, and a woman the aliens had never seen before. She wore the simple uniform of Earth's defense fleet, but she carried herself like someone who had commanded armies in real wars. Honored counselors, Jake began, his voice cutting through all the arguing. I would like you to meet Admiral Helen Foster, Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet. She has a proposal for you. The room became completely silent. Most of the aliens had never heard Helen's name before, and those who had knew her only as the person who designed humanity's paranoid military doctrine. She was the woman who insisted on building warships when the galaxy was at peace. Helen stepped forward, her gray hair and scarred hands marking her as someone who had survived conflicts the aliens couldn't imagine. We're launching a strike mission against the Devourer fleet in 72 hours. 1 ship, volunteer crew only. The silence stretched until Admiral Morvex began laughing, a sound like thunder rolling through mountains. 1 ship, human. Our greatest battlecruisers can barely survive being near these entities. What makes you think your primitive vessels can do what our advanced fleets cannot? Helen's smile was cold and sharp. Because we built our ship to fight gods, Admiral. Your people built theirs to keep peace among friends. She activated a holographic display that showed the USS Defiance. The ship looked wrong somehow, with angular lines and impossible geometry that hurt to look at directly. Where alien vessels curved gracefully through space, the Defiance seemed to cut wounds in reality itself. The Defiance operates using principles your scientists abandoned as too dangerous centuries ago, Helen explained calmly. Its weapons don't just destroy matter, they edit it out of existence entirely. Its defenses don't absorb enemy attacks. They convince reality that those attacks never happened in the first place. Dr. Alex Turner, who had joined the human delegation, stepped forward to share his research. The ancient texts we discovered weren't just warnings about the Devourers. They were instruction manuals left by civilizations that fought them before. Some of those civilizations actually won their wars. Impossible, Counselor Yixara clicked, her compound eyes flashing with disbelief. We have records going back 50,000 years. There's no mention of wars like this anywhere in our histories. Because the winners made sure there wouldn't be any records, Turner replied firmly. They used weapons that could edit history itself. The civilizations that defeated the Devourers then systematically erased all evidence of the conflicts, hoping future generations would never need such terrible knowledge. The implications of his words hung heavy in the chamber like a poisonous fog. The peaceful galaxy they had all known was only possible because their ancestors had fought wars so horrible, they had hidden them from history itself. Admiral Morvex leaned forward in his chair, his earlier amusement replaced by genuine concern. Even if your claims are true, human, what makes you believe your species can succeed where our ancestors needed entire galactic alliances working together? Helen's expression didn't change at all. Because we never forgot how to be monsters, Admiral. While your people built paradise, we kept our demons on a leash, just in case we needed them someday. The human delegation left the chamber without waiting for any response, leaving the council members to debate among themselves. But their arguments had become meaningless. 3 more worlds had gone silent while they were talking, and long-range sensors were detecting impossible shapes moving between the stars like predators hunting for prey. Aboard the human transport ship heading back to Earth, Jake reviewed casualty reports that made his stomach feel sick. The entities weren't just destroying worlds anymore. They were unmaking them so completely that even the memory of their existence was fading from the minds of survivors in nearby systems. "Will the Defiance launch on schedule?" he asked Helen. The Admiral nodded once. "Captain Nathan Clark and his crew are ready. The ship's computer has been programmed with every nightmare scenario our war planners could imagine. If it's not enough to stop them," she trailed off, staring out at the stars through the transport's small viewport. "If it's not enough," Jake finished her thought, "then maybe the galaxy deserves to be reset. Maybe consciousness was a mistake the universe is trying to correct." Helen's laugh was bitter and harsh. "That's exactly why humans are perfect for this mission, Jake. We've always suspected the universe was trying to kill us. Now we finally get the chance to return the favor." Back on the various homeworlds of the Galactic Council, military leaders were having their own private meetings. The truth was becoming clear to all of them, even if they didn't want to admit it publicly. Their advanced technology, their superior numbers, their thousands of years of experience meant nothing against an enemy that existed outside the normal rules of reality. Fleet Commander Zarkith of the Zelanti reviewed the latest battle reports in his private office. Every engagement followed the same pattern. Their ships would approach the Devourer entities. Their crews would begin experiencing psychological breakdowns, and then the vessels would simply cease to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone as if they had never been built. "Sir," his aide announced through the communication system, "we're receiving reports that some of our outer colonies are voluntarily evacuating. The civilian populations are fleeing toward human space." Zarkith wasn't surprised. Humans had a reputation for being aggressive and unpredictable, but they also had a reputation for surviving impossible situations. If the galaxy was ending, people wanted to be near the species that specialized in not dying when they were supposed to. Meanwhile, in the depths of space where 18 worlds had once existed, the darkness was growing stronger. The entities that had consumed those civilizations were learning from each victory, adapting their techniques, preparing for the next phase of their harvest. They had destroyed countless galaxies before this one, and they would destroy countless more after it was gone. But they had never encountered humans before. And somewhere in the hidden shipyards of Earth's outer system, something was being born that would teach the universe's oldest predators what it meant to be prey. The USS Defiance launched from Earth's hidden shipyards in the shadow of Jupiter's massive radiation storms, where humanity had spent decades preparing for wars that might never come. The ship's departure went unnoticed by most of Earth's population. A final service by a crew that expected never to see their home planet again. Captain Nathan Clark stood on the bridge watching Earth shrink to a tiny blue dot in the viewport. His crew of 200 represented the most psychologically dangerous individuals in human space, volunteers who had scored too high on aggression tests for normal military service. They were survivors of conflicts that had broken them in ways that made them perfect for impossible missions. "Final systems check. Lieutenant Wong," Clark ordered, his voice calm despite knowing they were flying toward almost certain death. "All systems running perfectly." "Captain," replied Amy Wong from the weapons control station. Her military record listed 17 separate disciplinary actions for using excessive force during peacekeeping missions, making her ideal for a job where excessive force was the minimum requirement. Quantum weapons fully loaded, reality anchors deployed, mental shields at maximum power. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the ship's chief scientist who had designed its impossible weapons, monitored readings that would have driven normal researchers completely insane. "The dimensional translation engines are stable, Captain. We can begin space-time folding on your command." The Defiance was more than just a warship. It was humanity's violent potential given physical form, built from technologies that other species had abandoned as too dangerous to use. Its hull existed in 7 different dimensions at once, making it effectively invisible to normal sensors. Its weapons didn't just destroy targets, they convinced the universe that those targets had never existed in the first place. "Any communications from the Galactic Council?" Clark asked. "Admiral Morvex is requesting our position and tactical information," reported Ensign Carl Peters from the communication station. "What should I tell him, sir?" Clark's smile was predatory and cold. "Tell the Admiral that human ships don't share targeting data. We hunt alone." The journey to the Outer Rim took 18 hours of folded space travel, during which the crew made final preparations for combat that might violate several fundamental laws of physics. The ship's meditation chambers worked constantly as psychic. Specialists prepared mental defenses against entities that existed partially outside normal reality. When they arrived at the coordinates, where New Valoria had once been, the space around them was completely wrong. Stars moved in patterns that hurt to watch, and the ship's sensors detected gravity wells shaped like mathematical equations that shouldn't be able to exist. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, Wong announced from her station. "Distance impossible to calculate because it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Through the main viewport they could see it. The thing that might once have been a ship, or a city or a living creature from nightmares beyond human imagination. It stretched across dimensions that human minds could barely understand, covered in appendages that moved through space-time like a swimmer moving through water. "Target acquired," Clark announced to his crew. "All hands, this is your captain speaking. Today we fight gods that eat galaxies. Today we prove that humanity belongs in this universe. Tactical fire when ready." The Defiance's main guns spoke with voices that reality had never heard before. Quantum torpedoes that existed in probability, rather than normal space, streaked toward the Devourer, followed by reality-cutting beams that carved wounds in existence itself. The entity's response was immediate and terrifying. Tentacles of living darkness lashed out, each one larger than a battleship trying to grab hold of the human vessel. Where they touched space, matter simply stopped existing, not destroyed but edited out of the universal equation like mistakes being erased. "Evasive maneuvers," Clark ordered. "Pattern Delta 7. The Defiance moved like no other ship in the galaxy, its impossible geometry allowing it to be in multiple locations at the same time. It danced between the Devourer's attacks with movements guided by tactical computers, programmed with every dirty fighting trick humanity had ever invented. "Direct hit on the primary mass," Wong reported. "Wait, it's healing itself. The damage is being repaired at the quantum level." Dr. Warren studied the incoming data with growing excitement rather than fear. "Captain, the entity is using the same reality editing technology we are, but in reverse. Where we delete things from existence, it restores them. We need to change our approach completely." "What do you recommend, Doctor?" "Stop trying to destroy it. Start trying to convince the universe that it was never created in the first place." The battle that followed would have been impossible to describe to anyone who wasn't there to witness it. The Defiance and the Devourer fought not just in normal space but across 17 different dimensions, each trying to edit the other out of history itself. Stars flickered and changed color as their weapons affected the basic rules that held reality together. For 43 minutes, the engagement continued. The human ship, smaller than one of the entity's sensory organs, darted and weaved through attacks that could have destroyed entire solar systems. Its crew fought with the desperate creativity of a species that had learned to survive by refusing to accept defeat under any circumstances. The turning point came when Ensign Peters, monitoring quantum communications, detected something completely unexpected. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from inside the entity. There are survivors from the destroyed worlds. They're being processed, not consumed." Clark understood immediately what this meant. The Devourers weren't just destroying civilizations for food or territory. They were collecting them, storing them in some kind of dimensional prison for purposes humanity couldn't yet comprehend. Which meant those civilizations could potentially be freed. "Wong, target the containment matrices. Warren, prepare a recursive probability bomb. We're not going to kill this thing. We're going to give it the worst case of indigestion in galactic history." What happened next violated so many laws of physics that the space around them would remain unstable for centuries to come. The recursive bomb didn't just explode in the normal sense. Instead, it convinced the universe that it had been exploding forever, creating a logical paradox that even the Devourer's reality editing abilities couldn't resolve. The entity began to shake and writhe, its impossible form twisting as contradictory timelines fought for dominance within its structure. From its core, thousands of stasis pods began shooting out like seeds from a broken fruit. The preserved populations of destroyed worlds, maintained in temporal suspension, were finally being released. But victory came at a terrible cost. The Defiance, caught in the edges of its own weapons' effect, began to phase in and out of existence. Half the crew was experiencing temporal displacement, aging and growing young again in cycles that made no logical sense. "Captain," Dr. Warren called out, her voice sounding distant as her consciousness flickered between past and future states. "The cascade effect is spreading beyond our target. If we don't contain it somehow, the paradox will unravel this entire sector of space." Clark looked at his crew, his broken, brilliant, impossible crew, and made the decision that would echo through galactic history for generations to come. "All hands, prepare for final maneuver. We're going to ride the paradox wave straight into the heart of Devourer space and take as many of these things with us as we can." The Defiance turned toward the center of the entity swarm, its engines pushing it faster than light, faster than time itself, into a realm where human concepts of cause and effect went to die fighting. 6 months after the USS Defiance disappeared into the time storm it had created, the first rescued populations began to remember their own names. The Kathrani survivors of New Valoria woke up in medical facilities across the galaxy, their memories perfectly intact but carrying impossible knowledge of what existed in the spaces between dimensions. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood before the Galactic Council once more, but the chamber had changed completely since his first warnings. Where elegant crystal walls had once displayed peaceful artwork, thick armor plating now covered every surface. Emergency weapons were mounted at regular intervals, and every representative wore personal defense shields that glowed with strange energies. The war was nowhere near finished. The Defiance's sacrifice created a paradox zone spanning 14 light-years. Jake reported to the assembled delegates who now listened to every word he spoke. Within that zone, the Devourers are trapped in endless time loops, fighting battles that never end because they never truly began. But this effect won't last forever. Admiral Morvex, his once perfect uniform now scarred from void combat and emergency evacuations, leaned forward with obvious concern. "How much time do we have left?" Dr. Turner's calculations suggest 5 years, maybe 10 if we're extremely lucky. Then the paradox will collapse and they'll break free, angrier and more numerous than before they were trapped. The weight of this news settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The human sacrifice had bought them time, nothing more. But in that precious time, something unprecedented had happened across the galaxy. Every species had begun learning from humanity's brutal example. "The joint defense fleets are ready for deployment," announced Fleet Admiral Zektar of the Zalanti, his mandibles clicking with grim determination that would have been impossible before the crisis began. 300 vessels equipped with human-designed reality anchors and quantum artillery systems. "We've studied your species' combat doctrines very carefully." Jake nodded approvingly, but his expression remained deeply troubled. The alien fleets were indeed impressive now. Massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half. Their once graceful lines now augmented with the angular brutality of human weapon systems. But something crucial was still missing from their preparations. "Your ships are powerful and your crews are well-trained," Jake acknowledged carefully, "but you're still thinking like civilized beings preparing to fight a civilized war." Counselor Yixara's translation device struggled to convey the subtle contempt in Jake's voice. "Are you suggesting our military preparation is somehow inadequate?" "I'm suggesting you still don't understand what you're really fighting against. The Devourers aren't just another enemy species with different technology and tactics. They're the universe's immune system, trying to eliminate consciousness itself from existence. You can't negotiate with them, can't understand their psychology, can't win by simply being better at conventional warfare. You can only win by being willing to become something worse than they are." The truth about Captain Nathan Clark's final transmission had been classified at the highest security levels. But Jake had seen the raw sensor data. In those last moments before the Defiance vanished forever, the ship's instruments had detected something that changed everything they thought they knew about the conflict. "There's something else you all need to understand," Jake continued with obvious reluctance. "The rescued populations have been permanently changed by their exposure to Devourer technology. They remember things that haven't happened yet, can see patterns in quantum foam that our best physicists can't detect. The experience has altered them at the most fundamental level imaginable. Dr. Alex Turner, now bearing the official title of Xenoarchaeological Advisor to the entire Galactic Council, stepped forward to address the assembly. His hair had gone completely white in the months since the rescue operations began, aged by knowledge that normal minds weren't designed to process. The survivors aren't just remembering their own experiences during captivity. Turner explained with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield. They're remembering the experiences of every civilization the Devourers have ever processed and stored. 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge from species that existed before our current galactic civilization even began. He activated a holographic display showing mathematical equations that seemed to writhe and shift when viewed directly. What we're learning from them is fundamentally changing our understanding of reality itself. The Devourers aren't just destroying consciousness to feed on it. They're harvesting it, storing it, preparing it for some purpose we can't yet comprehend. Admiral Morvex's laugh contained no humor whatsoever. You're telling us we rescued the survivors only to discover they're now carrying out the enemy's mission for them? I'm saying, Turner replied very carefully, that the traditional distinction between enemy and ally may no longer be relevant to our situation. The survivors are becoming something entirely new. Part biological, part technological, part quantum intelligence existing across multiple dimensions. They're evolving in real time, adapting to threats we haven't even encountered yet. Jake watched the faces around the chamber as the full implications of Turner's words began to sink in. The galaxy's carefully maintained peace was ending forever, replaced by something infinitely more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined possible. Humanity's violent nature, once scorned as primitive and barbaric, was now being desperately adopted by species that had known only order and stability for millennia. "What's the status of the human replacement fleet?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would be troubling. "The USS Retribution launches next month." Admiral Helen Foster's voice came through the quantum communicator from Earth's hidden military facilities, followed by the Vengeance, the Vindication, and the Reckoning. Each vessel incorporates the lessons learned from the Defiance's final battle and sacrifice. The ship names were deliberately chosen to send a message. Humanity was no longer content to simply warn and defend against cosmic threats. They were preparing to wage a war of complete extermination against forces that existed outside the normal rules of reality, and they were teaching the rest of the galaxy to do exactly the same thing. "There's one final matter we must discuss," Jake said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The paradox zone is showing signs of expansion beyond our original calculations. Whatever the Defiance accomplished in there, the effects are spreading outward. Space-time itself is becoming fundamentally unstable, creating pockets where the normal laws of physics simply don't apply anymore." The chamber fell into complete silence as the full scope of their situation became crystal clear. They had won their first battle against cosmic horror by choosing to become monsters themselves, but in doing so, had begun transforming the entire galaxy into something unrecognizable. The peaceful civilization they had fought desperately to protect was already gone forever, replaced by something harder, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. But as Jake looked around the room at the scarred faces and grim expressions of beings who had learned to embrace humanity's violent wisdom, he felt something his species understood better than most other forms of life. It was hope born from absolute desperation, strength forged in the fires of necessity, when survival required abandoning everything you once believed about right and wrong. The galaxy was becoming human in all the ways that mattered, and perhaps in a universe that regularly spawned things like the Devourers, that transformation was exactly what it needed to survive what was coming next.